Welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast, presented by Orion Advisor Solutions and hosted by Dr. Daniel Crosby, Orion's Chief Behavioral Officer and New York Times bestselling author. Looking for ways to help your clients become less susceptible to market fluctuations and peer influence? Get powerful personalization for every investor with Orion Custom Indexing, our tech-enabled solution for managing tax-efficient, customized portfolios at scale. Learn more at orion.com/custom indexing.
Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and I am joined today by someone who needs no introduction. Now, sometimes people say of a podcast guest that they need no introduction, but this guy actually needs no introduction. I'm here with Michael Kitces today. He's the Chief Financial Planning Nerd at Kitces.com, Head of Planning Strategy at Buckingham Wealth, and co-founder of XYPN and AdvicePay. He's the man in the blue shirt. He's everyone's favorite big brain. Welcome to the show, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Long overdue. So I'm glad we finally figured out how to make this work.
No, absolutely. Well, you're the hardest working man in show business. So I had to wait a few years, but here we got it in. So I got to start off with a funny anecdote that I tell about you sometimes when your name comes up, which it does. So we've shared the stage a couple of times, and one time in particular, you and I were talking and kind of running over our comments and in preparation for our joint remarks, and watching people approach you and worship at your feet with such reverence before a financial advisor conference was so interesting to me. And so, I mean, we were approached by multiple people who were like, "Hey, Daniel, Michael." So I have to ask, we're going to get to some meaty stuff, but what's the best and worst part of being you?
What's the best and worst part of being me? The best part I would probably go with just it is for me those conversations, and not for the put myself up on a pedestal. I mean, I joke sometimes like I was a loner high school nerd back when nerds was not the sometimes cool thing that it is today, maybe at least in some circles. It was not cool in anybody's circle back then. And so, I sort of find when people do well, there's sort of this two versions that crop up where of you have this don't you know who I am moment. There's the bad version that we see in the celebrity world where people are like, don't you know who I am? I should be able to, run free or have special permissions or do all this other stuff. And I live the other version, which is don't you know who I am? I'm the nerd high school loner. Nobody came to talk to me. I was not popular anywhere in any circle. And I joke sometimes, I feel like we never quite get that far from our high school selves at the end of the day. So wonderfully formative that they are. So to me, on the one end, those moments are still really, really strange. And I have my good share of imposter syndrome that still absolutely crops up to this day. But when I get into those conversations and just hear this thing I did, or this opportunity or success I had with a client, this change I made in my career because I read something on your site or heard something on your podcast, and my whole life has gone in a different direction that's been more positive for me and my family and my clients. And those stories, I can hear those stories all day long. To me, it's so powerful to hear actual impact of the work that we do. So I get a lot of those by email. We literally we have an internal Slack channel with our team. We drop them in the Slack channel to celebrate those stories. We share them in our all hands. We invite advisors every time we do a team retreat for our team to bring them in to share the stories of how they've been impacted by what we've done. So for me, I launched the platform in the first place for impact, because I wanted to actually have a bigger platform to impact the world in a positive way. That was the whole genesis of Kitces.com 15 years ago. And still to me to this day, it's just really cool to get to hear like you've done something and it really, really mattered and impacted people in a positive way.
Yeah. I spoke at an event earlier this week, and an advisor approached me with a book that was dog-eared to death, annotated one of my books. It was
Your
annotated.
book, yeah, your book, man.
Yeah. And like in the front and back cover of the book was notes from different podcasts I'd done.
Yeah.
And like
It's
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 the
just so,
most gratifying thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is just I don't know, there's a thing for anybody that's a creator that just at the end of the day, like, I just want to know someone saw my work and thought it was helpful and valuable to them. Like
Yeah.
that, there's still a component to that to me is really powerful. The worst side of it, like, candidly, just for what we've been dealing with lately, like, because the platform has grown as much as it has, I've been sucked in for the past few months into the deep dark side of what happens when people start not dealing with imposter syndrome in our heads, actual imposters who are making up fake Kitces accounts on WhatsApp and trying to swindle investors into like fake fraudulent schemes using my name and my firm's name, and then needing to like deal with WhatsApp legal to stamp out that stuff because people try to go online or like, is this person real? And they find all my stuff on the internet. Like, this person looks like a real investment expert. I guess I'm supposed to give them $38,000 to invest in this Hong Kong thinly traded penny stock. And then we get emails coming in of like, hey, I lost $38,000 on that investment you recommended, and then you kind of ghosted me. What happened? And we have to explain, like, that wasn't me. That was a fake person on WhatsApp who made it up and actually screwed you out of $38,000. So we've been like, that's been the really ugly part that's cropped up lately. And like, just, it's, I mean, when the whole thing for me is like impact and positively shaping people's life journey, like that's literally like the polar opposite extreme of like the most negative possible way that can show up. And just, in this social media age of just like burner throwaway accounts and all the stuff that goes with it, it is, as I'm learning in practice, like it is ridiculously hard to stamp those things out because people just like the fraudsters just go and make another one like 2 minutes later. And the platforms are so big and sort of nameless and faceless. Like you can't get a human being on the phone to say like, I need you guys to investigate this and stamp it out. You can like, file a complaint of one particular fraudster account and they'll shut it down, but then like a new one appears the next day.
Right. It takes nothing to start a new one. And the downside, so there's so little downside and so much potential upside.
Right.
And someone who's trafficking in, 2 decades of goodwill that you've built, by being a good guy, that's evil. But I think anyone who has any kind of a big presence in FinTwit, we'll call it, has experienced that. People trying to use their name and likeness, and I'm sure it's 10 times as bad for you.
I'd seen bits and pieces of that over the years, but this is the first round we've seen where like people are actually getting swindled out of dollars, and like we go through all the appropriate legal motions and the rest to try to get the thing shut down, but like usually we don't know until someone reaches out to tell us after the fact, and it's like, oh, I am so sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that was not me.
Yeah. Well, let's keep it in the cesspool that is let's keep it in the cesspool.
The cesspool of social media.
Social media. You were recently part of we'll call it a spirited fee debate on Twitter. We're not going to get into the specifics of that. This happens all the time.
I've done that debate a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be like the favorite debate to have on Twitter is about advisory fee models. I want to leave aside the broader debate about which model is good and which model is bad. I've seen you speak on the psychology of different types of those models with respect to salience.
Yes.
Salience is, I think, one of these psychological principles that underpin so much of the work we're trying to do with behavioral finance.
Yeah.
But I don't see many people talking about it with respect to fees.
Yeah.
I'd love to have you kind of break it down. Again, not which one's better and which one's
Yeah. Yeah.
worse, but help us understand psychologically how it works.
Yeah. So saliency at its core is the phenomenon of your own self-awareness that something is happening, right? Like it's salient when you're actually aware of it. And to me, like, I mean, the most straightforward way I can make the distinction is, it like an AUM fee in sort of a literal sense is transparent. Like it's a line item on my fee statements. I can go there and look and see it, as contrasted with often certain versions of commissions where just like I literally can't see it. I know someone got paid, but like there's no line item that I can see. And so in a sense, like an AUM fee is a transparent fee, as is like an hourly fee or a project planning fee, and a commission-based fee is, or commission-based compensation is not. And we talk a lot about industry transparency. Saliency, though, is how cognizantly aware I am of what I'm paying. So an AUM fee is transparent, but it's not particularly salient. I don't realize it's there. I don't have a lot of pain of paying. I mean, if you want to contrast that with like writing a check for a financial planning fee, like that's salient. Like I write the number with the zeros of how much money I'm paying you and sign my name to it. Like, exactly how much you're paying at that point. And it's interesting because I certainly pound the table very, very hard around transparency and consumer benefits around transparency. But when you get to saliency, to me, there is more of a double-edged sword that starts to crop up. So in the purest sense, fees that are really salient, like I'm so darn aware of what the fee is, like it's pretty hard for me to mess up and like not realize what I was paying because it was so salient that I felt it. But the problem is the sheer human psychology of it. Like if you induce the pain of paying in people, sometimes it just makes them not want to pay because it hurts more. And so what that means, like if you boil that down to the purest sense, if you take two advisors who charge $10,000 a year for a client, the first advisor charges 1% on an AUM basis because the client has $1 million. The second advisor takes the exact same client, charges the exact same $10,000 fee on $1 million account, but makes the client write a check for $10,000 a year. Same transparency, different saliency. I can guarantee you the second advisor that makes them write the check will have slower growth and higher attrition because high saliency just makes us so focused on the fee. We end up asking a whole lot more questions about like, well, what really am I doing for what really did you do for me for this fee? Because this fee really hurts when I write 10000 on a check and sign my name to it and hand it over to you and watch you take the check from my hand. It hurts more. And so from the pure pro-consumer end, arguably high saliency is good in many ways, right? People really know what they're paying. They're aware of what they're paying. It's a lot harder to get cheated and swindled or just like take your advisor for granted and pay a lot of money for very little service when it's very salient because you start thinking like, I'm paying you $10,000. What did you actually do for me over the past 12 months that was worth this $10,000? And we all know there is a segment of advisors out there that charge a lot of money for doing very little. And so, it's easy to kind of get up on the high horse and say like, well, I wish all planning fees and advice fees were more salient. But the flip side is what that means. Like if I take two equally awesome, fantastic, amazing, great, wonderful, they do everything you would want them to do advisors. The one who chooses to inflict a high salient fee on themselves is just going to grow slower and lose more clients than the AUM advisor doing the equally awesome high quality service. So in a world where everybody is good, you don't really want to inflict this on yourself. In a world where a lot of people are bad, you really want a high saliency fee so that consumers can help better self-select out of the problems. And then to me, in practice, we kind of live in a messy middle here of there are some good ones and there are some bad ones, and you have to decide where you want to be on that spectrum. But this idea of just recognizing there's a difference between transparency of fees and saliency of fees. And even a lot of people I find who are critical around the AUM model for saying like it's not transparent because people don't always realize what they're paying. That's actually not literally a transparency problem. It's a saliency problem. And that's not to say it doesn't matter and it's still important, but saliency is a pretty nuanced issue in practice because, what is good, what helps consumers against bad advisors is also a detriment to good advisors.
Yeah, that is the perfect breakdown. I liken it I liken it to when I was self-employed. I was self-employed for nearly a decade. I made, give or take the same amount I do today, but I would pay, 4 times a year, write a giant check to the US government. And
Uh-huh.
the pain of that was horrific versus like just having it now as a W-2 employee come out of my check every 2 weeks.
Oh yeah. I mean, arguably, the tax withholding system was a very brilliant application of how to do taxes in a low saliency manner. I mean, even just like the shift from toll roads to easy pass and the like,
Yeah.
depending on whatever you call it in your region, is a version of this. I mean, there was a study that came out a couple of years ago where economists went and actually looked at how quickly tolls have grown, like how rapid toll increases have gone, because most parts of the country, toll roads are still public roads, which means you have to vote on the toll increases. And so you can measure like how resistant people are to the tolls by just looking at their voting behavior in November and the trend of tolls. And what they found was that even once you control for local economy and demographics and all the rest, areas that have converted from stop at the toll booth, pull out your wallet, count out the money, hand it over to the person, watch them take it from your hands, like all that very high saliency model, and have gone to an electronic toll booth format, tolls are rising in those counties 20 to 40% faster than they would have otherwise, because I'm literally not feeling the pain of paying. And the added irony that goes with it is not only are the tolls rising 20% faster, people drive through the toll booths 20% more often.
Yeah.
Which is basically like a complete breakdown of economics 101, right? It's supposed to be when the price goes up, the usage goes down. And instead, that's not at all what's happening. When the saliency gets lower, the pricing gets higher and the utilization gets higher. And so, look, if I'm a good advisor, I appreciate that. It means I can charge a full valued fee for what I'm worth, and my clients don't push back on it as much, and they just utilize my services more, which I want to do when I'm a good advisor. But then when I put on my pro-consumer hat, I'm like, well, that's also how a lot of crappy advisors charge a lot of money for doing very little.
Yeah, it's almost sort of the inverse of arguably the greatest behavioral intervention in financial history, which is the Save More Tomorrow program, sort of the automated withdrawal and escalation of retirement savings. You're just as surely as there's a pain of paying, there's a pain of saving, which we experience as a present loss. And that whole program just made it less salient. I guess we'll leave it here because there's lots more I want to talk to you about. But one of the things that I hate about this is you've outlined it brilliantly, but I find a lot of times flat fee advisors, project-based advisors are some of the best advisors out there. Like some of the best, biggest hearted, most well-intended advisors out there. And I think that they can shoot themselves in the foot by sort of doing something that has a layer, like creates a psychological hurdle.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think the challenge that a lot of us have, look, all of us have seen clients come in. If you've been in this business for any period of time, you've seen clients come in from a prior financial advisor. I'm putting in air quotes because it probably wasn't really an advisor person. It was someone that sold them something or wrapped a whole bunch of fees around relatively little service. And when you see that repeatedly as an advisor, it's hard not to say, like, yeah, maybe we need to change the model. Maybe we need to do some stuff differently. Like, look at how these people are getting harmed. And on the one hand, like I do agree with that. And, we do a lot of advocacy work around increasing standards and changing rules for advisors to have higher standards and better accountability as well. But at the same time, I do think it's important to reflect, like, most of us never see any of the clients who are well served by other advisors. because they're well served by other advisors. They hang out with that advisor. I mean, like, we only see the ones that are getting served the worst because those are the ones who break away from their prior former advisor, who probably wasn't even really an advisor, and show up on our doorstep. And so I do think there is sort of this piece that we have to bear in mind. And I do think sometimes some of us lose a little bit of sight of, which is when we see the clients who are coming from other advisors, we see a very, very, very not representative sampling of who's being served. Like, most advisors do a pretty good job for a pretty reasonable fee. There's not a lot of advisors with giant yachts making, ginormous profit margins, charging way too much to do basically nothing. Yes, there are a few exceptions we see, but most advisors are doing good hard work, trying to do the best to serve their clients. They make a reasonable living in a pretty darn hard business to get going, particularly in the early years. Mm-hmm. And they're serving their clients pretty well, which is why most clients don't leave and move anywhere. When we see them, we tend to see the very non-representative, really nasty segment of the industry, because that's who actually peels off. And I'm glad to win business from those folks as well, and lift consumers up. But I do think it's important to reflect back and bear in mind, what we see of the clients who leave other advisors is not actually what the average other advisor out there looks like. You don't see the average other advisor because their clients aren't leaving the same way yours aren't. Yeah,
no, well said. So I want to reintroduce listeners to a sort of mental scaffolding and an intellectual framework that was set forth by the British Nudge Unit, and it's called EAST. And it says if you're trying to change behavior, you want to make it easy, attractive, social, and timely. So we just talked a bit about the easy piece, right? I mean, the save more tomorrow thing, that just makes it easy. You've written and talked some about the social piece of this, and I think it's wildly underutilized, because we know that we're social creatures. We know that social influence plays a huge impact on our behavior. Estimates of client non-compliance with financial advice are all over the place. I think the most reliable ones I've seen are kind of in the 40 to 50% range. You talk about using social accountability to better help clients see through their plans. Tell us how you do that and how you do it tactfully.
So I think there's a few layers of how we can do this. The most straightforward by far is literally just the client check-in meetings that we already have. Most of us meet, at least with I'll call it our core clients that we're actively engaged with. Most of us meet with our clients 2 to 3 times a year. But a lot of the time when we come into those meetings, it's just literally we're coming in, what's been going on in your life, anything new going on, is there anything happening in your life that we should be talking about? If there is, we do. If there's not, I had a couple of talking points I brought with me, and then I can pull out a portfolio performance statement if we want to talk about that, and we don't have time to talk about anything else. But in essence, our meetings are very in the moment, what's going on, and let's tackle what's going on right now. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing from a pure client service end, but the part to me that's missing is, what did we say we were going to do at the end of last meeting? What were our takeaways? What was that thing I was going to do, or you were going to do, you were going to work on, or you said you were going to call the attorney and get your estate planning document started, because we've talked about this for 2 years and you haven't done it yet. So we said at the end of last meeting, you're going to reach out to your attorney and get your estate planning document started. And so often social accountability can be as simple as, instead of coming into the next meeting with the, hey, let's check in and see how it's going, I'm going to come to the meeting with an agenda. The agenda says at the beginning, check in on last meeting's takeaways, where it has, you were going to check in with your attorney. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you about it. And the key here is, I don't just come into the meeting with that agenda that has that. send you the agenda a week in advance that says like, hey, here's what's coming up. We got our meeting next week. I want to check in with you on the outreach to the attorney. Also, update you on the new RMD rules that are kicking in, and got a planning strategy I want to talk to you about, and then we'll do the performance review, whatever. There are probably a couple of things on the agenda. But the first one is that check in about getting the estate planning attorney scheduled. And what will happen in about 95% of cases is when you get to the meeting, the client will have scheduled the meeting with the attorney because they don't want to come into the meeting and have to admit to you that they didn't do it. And it will almost certainly have gotten done in the 1 week window between when you sent the agenda and when the meeting was. It didn't get done in the preceding 5.9 months since you saw them last on your twice a year schedule. It gets done in the window between when you reminded them through the agenda, I'm going to be checking in with you on this, and when I actually get in the meeting with you, because just socially, my client doesn't want to sit across from me and say, I didn't do the thing I said I was going to do, right? And it's particularly from the psychology end, it's particularly important if you can get to the end of the prior meeting and not say, hey, you need to go meet with your attorney. You get to the point of saying, hey, so the documents have been sitting out there for a long time. Mr. Mrs. Client, what do you want? Is this something that you want to work on and advance forward? And they'll say yes or no. Yes. Okay. What do you think is a realistic thing that you can tackle over the next 6 months before our next meeting? Do you want to do all the documents? You just want us to reach out to the attorney and get it started, whatever it is. We're just going to reach out to the attorney and get started. Cool. I'm going to write that down and I'm going to check in with you on that when we come in for our next meeting. And so they identified what they're willing to do, which means they've now made a verbal commitment to you in a social dynamic. And so when I'm coming up to the next meeting, if I just remind them a week before the meeting through the distribution of an agenda, hey, this is coming, the sheer social embarrassment of them coming into the meeting and have to admit that they did not do the thing that they said they committed to me that they were going to do. And I'm going to look them in the face and say what happened. We don't like those moments as human beings, and they can be a tiny bit awkward. They can be a tiny bit pressured, but that's literally how accountability works. If it never feels bad to not do the thing, you never do the thing. And I find some of us from the advisor end tend to resist that a little bit because we don't want to make clients feel awkward or pressured. But the reality is, in a lot of cases, that's literally what clients sign up for. I mean, I've had clients over the years who said, usually not in as many words, but something in the effect of I'm hiring you because I know there are things I need to do and I don't get them done. I kind of need someone to kick my backside a little bit. Please do it nicely. But I need someone to kick my backside, nudge me a little to make sure I do the things that I know I'm supposed to do, right? Delegator types in general are often self-aware enough that they actually do need a little bit of help. And so as long as you're doing in professional and respectful ways, it's very powerful. But to me, this is one of the reasons why, human beings hold up so well in the advice domain, because you can do this with technology as well. I'll give a shout out to the folks that literally called Nudge with a K, KNUDGE, that's trying to make a client task tracking tool to help automate this a little bit more. And I love what they're building in the technology. And I think the tech is great to help with some of those reminders. But at the same time, pure tech doesn't really work in the same way, right? If I want to wake up early to go for a jog, I can set my alarm early, but I can still snooze it. Mm-hmm. If I tell my friends we're going to go jogging at 7 o'clock in the morning, I am not going to be the one that leaves him on the street corner to jog alone at 7 o'clock. I don't want to be that guy. Right. He doesn't want to be the one to leave me standing on the street corner to jog alone at 7 o'clock in the morning. So we can set all the alarms and use all the technology we want, but we can hit the snooze and blow right through them. The minute there's another human being in a relationship on the line, all of a sudden we show up in a way that the technology does not drive us. And to me, that's why personal trainers are doing fine, even though you could literally find any conceivable workout on YouTube that you would ever want to learn and be trained in how to do. And to me, it's why financial advisors continue to do well. There's this power of social accountability, but I think we underutilize it as advisors, either because we haven't really thought about doing it with intentionality, right? Asking the client to pick the thing and make a commitment to it, commemorating it in a takeaway, in meeting notes, surfacing it to them as an agenda before the meeting, and then checking with them at the meeting, like all those things that you need to actually create the accountability moment. Sometimes we don't do it because we haven't learned how to apply it. Sometimes we don't do it because we are afraid it's going to be an awkward or bad thing for the client to put a little pressure on them. But like, that's actually how stuff gets done. And most people appreciate it when it's done well. Anybody who's ever been pushed by a coach has been on, like, there's a good end of when someone challenges you in a constructive way and helps to lift you up to do it.
Yeah. So the sort of intellectual underpinning beneath what Michael's talking about, it comes from the work of Robert Cialdini. And if you want to read his book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, fantastic book, right? He talks about these 6, he calls them weapons of influence. That's a little hawkish for my taste, but right, these six sort of pillars of influence. And one of them is commitment and consistency. We want to make commitments, and then we want to be consistent with those commitments. Years ago, I was at a Braves game, and the University of Georgia Psychology Department had a group of folks signing pieces of paper that say, "I pledge not to drink and drive," after the game, right? I pledge not to drink and drive after the game. And I went and spoke with them about it. And I'm like, what is this? And like, does this have any teeth? And they're like, no, it's entirely based on Cialdini's idea that we want to give our word, and then we want to live consistently with that word.
Yep.
The last bit of research I'll share, there's actually research to show that there's sort of this yin and yang of social encouragement, and then social sort of holding our feet to the fire. And both need to be in place if we're going to achieve our goals. And what happens sometimes, like on social media, is on January 1st, I'll put something on Twitter that says like, this is the year I'm going to lose 25 pounds. And what happens is everyone goes, good for you. I believe in you. You're the best. You can do it. And then like that kind of scratches that itch. And we find from the research that people who get the praise without the accountability actually do worse than nothing at all. So you need that.
Yeah, at some point you need to know that someone's going to actually ping you in a few months, be like, dude, so how's the weight loss thing going? Exactly. It's like, oh, I engaged in some not good behaviors over the past week or two, right? Like and again, I mean, just that's why coaches work. That's why trainers work, right? Even in the sports context, in the weight loss context, in the exercise context, like I think it applies equally well in the financial advisor domain. But those I find just are ones that are more familiar. That like, it's you have to know you're going to be sitting across from someone who's going to say like, so how about the thing that we've been working on? Did you do what you said you were going to do? And like, not did you do what I told you to do? Did you do what you said you were going to do? Because we don't like to be in that moment. Side note for any advisors who are growing, like this works in your team as well. I mean, like this is a fundamental of management principles as well. The more often you have team meetings to check in on the takeaways of what you were supposed to do at the last meeting, the more often things get done, for the simple reason that like nothing gets done until there's a deadline to meet it.
Yeah. So
the more often and steady you have meetings with deadlines, the more frequent things get done. Yeah.
So your segues are so on point today. We're talking about coaches. I wanted to ask you about a McKinsey study, and I ask you because it hit every one of my confirmation biases. So I'm in no position to objectively sort of look at this think piece they came out with a while back, but it was on the future of wealth management, and sort of the basic premise of it was, look, sort of the meat and potatoes of wealth management is getting technologized and commoditized. We've been hearing that for a long time. And the future of advice is effectively being a life coach, like almost being a core. I think they actually said the term life coach, and you're effectively going to be a quarterback for many different parts of this client's life because money touches every part of our lives. Do you share that opinion? Because I love it, because it smells like job security to me. But do you share that opinion, or do you think that that's a little bit oversold?
I think it's a little bit oversold in the idea that that applies like universally to all advisors, that like that's the model. I think it's a model and a service that a segment of consumers will buy in the future. I don't think it's the model that all folks buy in the future. So I like to think about this in a version of, there was a guy many years ago, not well known in the industry today, named David Meister. And David had put out a book known as Managing the Professional Service Firm that I still cannot recommend more highly enough today as a fundamental, incredible book to read on practice management. The like one of the most disturbing things to me about the book is that it was written 25 years ago, and it was written generically about professional services firms. Like nothing is specific to financial advisors. And it's so darn accurate about the challenges and issues and opportunities that financial advisor firms face then and today. Like it's astonishing. The guy is absolutely brilliant. So highly, highly recommend the book. One of the frameworks that Meister gives around professional services firms that I think still fits today and is particularly good in this context. So he breaks professional services firms into 3 different types in like just the core offering and value of what they do. The first are what he calls brains firms. You hire us for our brains. This is typically who you hire when you need super deep expertise for an entirely novel problem that no one has seen before. Like, hey, I got this like crazy tax situation with 4 different businesses that are interwoven with each other, and I'm trying to do a merger recapitalization, and I just need like the freaking smartest legal tax attorney in the country who can figure out this thing that no one has ever done. And if I have to pay you like $1,000 an hour to do it, I'm willing to do it because I got a super complex, high stakes problem. And so firms like this, right? This has nothing to do with coaching, quarterback. And this is like, I need a freaking amazing brain to solve a problem that no one's ever seen before. That's one group of firms. The second group of firms are what Meister calls gray hair firms. Gray hair firms are firms that have it's not necessarily about the expertise, although they often have a lot of expertise. It's about the experience. These are the firms that will essentially come and say, like, you're trying to solve a fairly complex problem. We've solved problems like this before. We've got the playbook. We know how to do it. Come here and we'll help you out. In practice, this is where a lot of niche specialization kinds of firms go. Right? We know how to do it. We've done it before. We've done retirement rollovers for 172 other airline pilots at your company. We know how to do the rollovers and navigate the pensions and all the rest. So you could go to any financial advisor and pay them a whole bunch of money to figure it out the first time. But we've done it for 172 people just like you. We've got the gray hair to prove it. Come and work with us. Yeah. So it's much more about the experience to solve a known problem that's still specialized. So not everybody knows how to do it, but we know how to do it. Mm-hmm. This is still not particularly a coachy sort of thing. This just tends to be, I've got a problem. It's got some complexity and I want someone that knows how to do it and is going to do it right. I don't need to pay for a novel solution. I know other people have dealt with this before, but I do want to hire someone that has dealt with this before. The third domain are what Meister calls procedural firms. Procedural firms do a very standardized, repetitive, in a box thing. We've done it for a zillion people. We've drilled down every single standardized process that's associated with it. So we can all do it the same way. From a business end, it's like a very highly leveraged business because I can hire relatively junior advisors or professionals to do the thing because I've so standardized what we do procedurally that I just have to like train a person to do the thing or even queue up some technology to do the thing and then off it goes. In procedurally oriented firms, I think some of this dynamic around being a coach quarterback starts to crop up a lot more because the whole point at this point is I'm not hiring you for your brain. I'm not hiring you for your gray hair. But if I do want a human being, I'm not just literally buying a piece of technology to do it for me. Like what's left? I'm literally hiring a human being to walk me through the process. They're not going to really adapt it for me. It's a standardized process, but they're going to take me through the process and make sure that I get the right experience to get to the end. And when you get down like, well, what are you left with if you're not bringing your brains and your gray hair? You're bringing your relationship skills, you're bringing your coaching skills, you're bringing all of those domains that frankly are not so conducive to systematized technology and repetitive process. Like that's still the human-y parts that wraps around that, right? I can give you the technology, but then you just don't use the technology. So I'm going to be your coach and quarterback to help you get through the thing and do the thing that you know you're supposed to do, but you're probably not going to do on your own. So I'm going to show up and help you do it and get through it. I see a lot of discussion around this because when you look like particularly from the consulting domain, right? McKinsey worked with giant mega firms, right? Giant mega national firms. Mega national firms generally don't do brains problems and gray hair problems because it's too expensive for them to build and scale, right? Like you can't do brains problems nationally. You need like 1,000 of the most brilliant attorneys that are out there, or 1,000 of the most brilliant advisors that are out there. And at some point that just gets really, really expensive to staff. It's a lot easier to create a systematized, standardized thing and hire relatively junior people to do it on a repetitive basis. Big national firms don't even tend to do gray hair problems as much because you need to hire really experienced people who are really expensive. And it's a lot easier to just make a standardized thing that's done on a repetitive basis and then hire less expensive, more junior people that can do that part. They just, you don't have to pay the premiums for the brains or the great, like the super expertise brains or the super deep gray hairs. So in a scaled advice world, I think this is increasingly where it goes. And when McKinsey mostly talks with companies that are doing big mega national scale reach, I think that is where a lot of it goes. When I look at the independent channels, though, I'm not so sure. Frankly, as big firms go that direction, it creates more differentiation for the independents to either be deep expertise brains firms or to be gray hair experience firms. Yeah, you can get the big box thing, but we'll help you do this very specialized, complex thing that's higher stakes. You're going to pay a little more, but you want to because there's a lot of risk. You don't want to screw it up. And we actually end up differentiating in the independent channels by not doing that end. The one asterisk I would add to it is I do think there will be some version of independent firms that do this where it literally is the service, right? It's one thing to say, we kind of like, we do a standardized offering. We've got some systems and process around it. Our advisors are mostly relationship managers that do coaching and quarterbacking because they're kind of running a standardized process. They can't do a lot else, but they can do that. It's really, really valuable. I do think there will be a segment of firms as well that are literally in like the financial coaching business. And there's a version of that exists in the marketplace today. But right now, financial coaching mostly exists in the like cash flow budgeting domain as like an alternative to wealth because you don't have to be registered as an investment advisor. I do think there's a version of, I don't know, call it wealth coaching that shows up in the traditional advisor domain that leans further into this. But candidly, I don't know how big that market is at the end of the day, because there are only so many people that actually want to go seek someone out and hire someone and pay for it. There's a lot of people who need it, but it doesn't necessarily, everybody is ready to sort of admit that they need some help with this and that it's time to go pay for someone, right? Like, I was a psychology major as well. Like, as you know, the psychology realm, like there are a lot of people who would benefit from therapy. There are relatively few people who are willing to actually hire a therapist for just a lot of personal dynamics, family dynamics, social dynamics, stigmas in some circles, depending on what your upbringing and background is. Just like there's a lot of reasons why a lot of people don't end up hiring therapists. I do worry there's sort of a similar phenomenon that like if your sole value proposition is behavioral coaching, I think that's probably a smaller niche business to do it as a standalone offering. It will have some demand. I don't know how big that market is. But I think the rest of where it shows up is highly scaled, procedural oriented firms because they're not trying to train their people in expertise and experience. The value add becomes literally the relationship management and then the coaching and quarterbacking that goes with it. So that's where I think it shows up. And it's a model and it will be a big one. Yeah. But it's not the only one or the only value prop around it.
Well, setting aside my biases, that seems like a measured and it seems like a measured and a thoughtful response, and I could absolutely see it playing out that way. So, We just have a few moments left, and before I let you
Yeah.
go, I would be remiss if I did not ask you about AI, right? I wouldn't be doing
Yeah.
my job if I didn't ask you about AI. And right this morning, right before we went on, I sent a thing out on Twitter, and I said, "Hey, what questions do you have for Michael?" And Craig Iskowitz said, "Ask Michael effectively why is AI the kiss of death for tech vendors?" And I think he had it in quotes, so I had not heard you say that, but I didn't know if that was something you had said. So yeah, what do you
Hmm.
think about what do you think about AI, and is that Craig's idea, or is he?
Oh, I know what he's referring to. So yes, yeah, there actually is a phenomenon that we've seen that marketing that you offer AI seems to be a kiss of death for technology vendors right now. The vendors that lean the most into marketing that they have AI are the ones that seem to be struggling the most. When we do a lot of our like tech research of advisor adoption trends behind the scenes, like who's actually buying what, the
Mhm.
more vendors market with AI, the worse they're actually doing in growing. And so here's where I think it comes from, kind of getting to Craig's question, and it ties to sort of where the threats are or are not for advisors and AI in the first place. So imagine for a moment, I need to get across town for a meeting. So I pull out my phone, I hit a button, and a car just shows up to take me where I want to go. It's a pretty cool service. We have this today. We call it Uber, Lyft, et cetera. Like, it's a pretty amazing thing. Revolutionized a lot of how people get around, particularly if you're in city areas. So cool service. So now you walk up to the car and you do what any of us have done with the Uber thing. Like, you open the back door, you look up to the front, you make sure like the picture of the driver matches the picture in the app. They ask you your name as well to make sure that you're like getting in the right car. Except you look up to the front and there's no one there. It's a driverless car. And so the question is, do you get in the car knowing that it's a driverless AI driven car? And if you actually look at the consumer research on this, the answer is overwhelmingly most of us do not get in the car. Pew Research does interesting data of like broad-based consumer trends, and like Pew Research data is basically more than 2/3 of us don't get in that car. And it's a funny thing to think about. Like, we're not ready to trust our lives because, you get in that thing and it doesn't work out. Like, you have now been killed by an AI driverless car.
Mhm.
Most of us are not willing to put our lives in the hands of AI.
Mhm.
Right. And some of that is, I don't really know what the tech is. I don't know how good the tech is. Who's the maker of this AI? Like, is this Uber AI? Is this Lyft AI? Is this some other services AI? Like, who's vetted the AI? How is that done? And, you quickly get to the point of like things I can't figure out while I'm standing on the curb trying to figure out if I'm going to get into this car or not.
Mhm.
I just say, forget it. I'm not going to do it. And we actually set the stakes so high on this that if I just said to you that like the AI is as good as a human, we still tend to have doubt. Like, is it really? Who's vetted it? How is that decision made? Like, how did you really figure that out? What you get to is the AI actually has to be better than the human
Mhm.
just to trust it as much as we already trust a human. I mean, if you think about that, I will get in the car with a complete total stranger, which, growing up as a Gen Xer in the era of stranger danger, like, it's fascinating how we went from do not ever get into a car with a stranger to hit a button on your phone and get in the car with a stranger.
Mhm.
Fascinating how the world changes in 20 years. But uh, when there's no driver in that car, we actually trust it less than when there was a mere stranger who at least has some desire for human self-preservation and is probably not going to drive us off a cliff, no matter how the technology faulty wiring goes, because they just want to preserve themselves and keep themselves alive.
Mhm.
So there's this AI, I call it like the AI trust penalty that exists, that AI has to not just be as good as, it has to be better than the human. And then we still have to decide that we want to spend the time and energy and effort to research to make sure this AI from this tool or service or platform is good enough to be better than a human. And that's such a ludicrously high bar. And just from a practical business end or consumer end, like, It's easier to just ask my friends or family who's a decent, good advisor than do like 47 hours of research on the internet to figure out which AI financial advisor is better. And if you really want to do 47 hours of research on the internet to figure it out, the truth is you're not someone who hires advisors. You're a self-directed person who likes spending 47 hours on the internet. So more power to you. Self-directed investors are going to use AI in all sorts of cool ways. But the whole nature of who tends to hire advisors, which are delegators, like, I don't want to figure that stuff out. I'm hiring you to figure that stuff out. And when I can then come to the table as a financial advisor and say, am I willing to risk my career, my licenses, my E&O, my liability to bet that someone's AI is good enough to not get me sued with a client?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us come back to the same thing, which is, I can rely on the technology that writes AI all over their website, or I can be the good, confident professional that I am and keep my fate in my own two hands and not buy the technology that has AI in its name, which is, I think, why in practice we're seeing like companies that market as AI to advisors are literally doing worse and getting less growth because of this AI trust penalty. And it doesn't mean that I don't think that technology automation isn't going to do cool, amazing things, and that there will be neat use cases for AI to power some of our back offices over time. Like, I'm actually bullish on what the technology does for us in the long run. But I feel like both from the advisor end and I guess from the tech vendor end as well, like, stop telling me you have all this fancy AI and just tell me what you actually do that makes my life better and easier. And if it makes my life better and easier, I really couldn't care less whether you do it with AI or like 10,000 monkeys that have figured out how to do this. Like, I just want the thing that makes my life easier and has a reasonable cost and gives me a good outcome.
Well, there's no doubt AI has become a sort of a marketing buzzword as much as anything else. And I love this idea of the AI trust penalty. And I think what's brilliant about your response too is just considering the psychographics of the people we serve, right?
Yeah.
It's not that AI is all good or all bad or will or won't revolutionize the world, but considering the psychographics of a delegator, someone who's the type of person who works with an advisor, looks a little different than Joe off the street. So Michael, we're out of time. You're not hard to find online, but just for kicks, where can we find your work and read your thoughts?
Best places to track me down is kitces.com, kitces.com, has all of our writing and commentary and kind of spider webs out to all the other things we do. You can also find me on Twitter at Michael Kitces, on LinkedIn as Michael Kitces. So I show up on all the usual social media places as well. Just make per the conversation thought, make sure it's the actual me.
Yeah.
Not the imposter me.
And don't put 38 grand.
If I reach out to you on social media and say I've got a hot investment stock trading tip, that's the not me version of me.
Stay away from the Kitces Indonesian REITs and
yes,
find the real one.
Yes,
Michael,
please.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much for your time and all you do for the industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate the opportunity to join. And congratulations on the growth of the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Standard Deviations. If you can't wait till next week for more behavioral finance insights, visit www.orion.com. All opinions expressed by Dr. Daniel Crosby and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of or endorsement by Orion and its affiliates, subsidiaries, and employees. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for legal, tax, and investment decisions. The opinions are based upon information the participants consider reliable.